From mom, stepmom, wife, and co-parent, come with me on this new chapter of new beginnings and adventures to becoming Bonnie, a different mom and a co-parent. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Becoming Bonnie. This is Bonnie. Today I want to talk a little bit about how I grew up. I didn't grow up in a typical household with a mom and a dad, and that was okay. I think how I grew up was how I was supposed to grow up, and I feel like it has made me who I am today. And I think every experience you have in life, even from when you were small, creates the kind of person you're going to be when you're an adult. I was born into a really loving home with a mom and a dad. From the memories I have, I was a happy kid. My dad, Victor, was great. He was that typical Mexican dad. He and my mom divorced though when I was 5 years old. But from what I remember, he spent a lot of time with me and showed me a lot of love. Obviously I was small, but some things I remember, are going to church every Sunday and then going to my Nino's house, and they would watch soccer and drink. And I just remember the energy he used to give me, and I loved it. I remember going to Mexico, hanging out at my grandma's house, his mom, and I would be with all my cousins and aunts and uncles, and I would just have a ball. It was fun. I was living a really good childhood. My mom, when I was growing up, was obsessed with taking pictures and videos, and so I know I have memories, but I also have videos and pictures of my dad being very involved and playing with me a lot when I was small. I loved my dad, Victor, so much. I mean, he was my dad, and I feel like what little girl doesn't love their dad that much, He was my everything. He was my protector, my teacher, my safe place, And not to take from the love that I have for my mom, but my dad and I were pretty tight. Like, I loved him a lot. We had a loving home, a full family. I mean, I was small. What did I know? And all I know is that my life fell apart when my parents decided to get divorced. Like, I think any child's life falls apart when their parents split up. After they split up, my dad would come every Sunday, and he would go to church, and then we'd go to Chuck E. Cheese after and spend time and play together. It was fun. He would pick me up, and we would go to my uncle's parties, his side of the family, and I loved all my family. I mean, they're my family. My dad's favorite candies were always these little like Tommies. They have like red on top that are really hard to find now. But I remember going to parties and always saving them for him when I would go to my mom's side of the family parties. So that when he would pick me up on Sundays to go to church, I would give him a little jar of, whatever candies I had for him. I really couldn't wait to see him every weekend. I remember very clearly one Sunday he shows up, and there's a woman and kids in the car, and he's like, "Get in, we're gonna go to church." And I was like, yeah, no way, I am not getting in that car. Like, what is wrong with you? And I was so mad, and I was not going in that car for two reasons. I was mad because how dare he bring another woman and her children? He was my dad. And then how dare he bring them to our Sunday to hang out together? Like, we go to church and we go to Chuck E. Cheese. Like, if you do have her, leave her at home. She can have Saturdays. I was 5 and I wanted my dad. Oh, I was almost 6 at this time. I wanted my dad for myself. I was selfish and I didn't care. My mom and I went to church, and then we went to my grandparents' house. And my grandparents lived right behind my godparents' house. So I remember we were walking down the driveway, and I look up to the porch, and my dad's sitting there with my Nino drinking. He didn't turn to look at me. He didn't say anything to me. He didn't even acknowledge my presence. And I was so sad and hurt. I felt unwanted. Like, he had left my mom, but now he was leaving me. it was really, really hard. You know, as any kid would probably feel when their dad completely ignores them for no reason at all, more than she wanted just to spend time with him and not his new girlfriend and her new children. You know, I don't remember seeing my dad, Victor, after this incident. I mean, I saw him twice more after this, but not in the same capacity. But that's a story for another day. I don't remember the conversation, or if there was a conversation, or how it went. I mean, I was 6 years old, but I came to find out that Victor wasn't my real dad. My mom had married him when she was pregnant. He knew she was pregnant, and he decided to take on the role of being my dad. He even gave me my last name. He's on my birth certificate. I was Yvonne Gomez for a really, really long time. And I mean, I think I was sad. I mean, who wouldn't be sad? This man taught me to walk, to talk, and then at 6 you just find out he's not really your dad. I'm sure I was heartbroken. I mean, it couldn't be an easy conversation to have, and it couldn't be an easy conversation to hear. But honestly, I must have blocked it out because I don't remember that. About a year after the last time I saw my dad, Victor, I don't remember how this all happened, but I was introduced to my real dad, Robert. I remember going to my dad Robert's house and meeting my grandpa Richie, and he was sick when I met him, but I remember he would get all of his energy up and do these little card games with me. You know, I still remember them, and he loved me a lot, and he would give my cousin money and we would go buy ice cream, and I felt like, okay, I have a grandpa, like this is cool, you know, I have a new dad, I have a new grandpa. And then I started going to my dad's mom's house, meet them. And at first my mom would come with me, and I was able to meet and hang out with my new uncles and aunts and cousins, and it was a whole new family, and it was awesome. They were welcoming and funny, and we laughed and played games, and they were my new family, and I loved them, and I felt loved by them so much. It was wonderful. I mean, I had just lost my dad, per se. Like, he was still alive, my first real dad, but it was hard. My mom would go with me when I would go with my real dad, Robert, and his family. Not to be with him, but to make sure I was comfortable with him and his family. I mean, I didn't know them. I had just met them. And I'm so grateful for this, because honestly, it made me feel so comfortable, and I was able to be myself and really get to know them. I don't know the reason why my parents aren't together. I don't know the reason why my dad wasn't there when I was small. I did ask my mom once, and one thing about my mom is she has never spoken bad about my dad, and she told me, you need to ask him. It's not my story to tell, and honestly, I never have asked him. I started going to my grandma's house a lot more. I don't remember how often, but I remember going a lot. This went on for maybe about a year. I had lots of fun with my dad, Robert. We would watch movies, play video games, go to golf and stuff, go to the batting cages. He was just this cool, fun dad, and I loved him. Like, it was awesome. And then I remember for about a year, I didn't see him, and it was weird. I missed him and my family, and I thought I had done something wrong. I mean, first, my dad Victor left me, and then now my dad Robert wanted nothing to do with me. I mean, I was 7 years old. What was I supposed to think? Now as an adult, I know that there were problems between the adults and that I had no fault in them, and I was just collateral damage. But at that time, I didn't know that, and I was heartbroken. I thought something was wrong with me. I was doing something wrong. I missed my dad Robert, his family, my family, you know? And then I was almost about 8 years old, and then my dad Robert came back into the picture. And I was so happy that he was back. I mean, I missed him. And this time my mom was dating my now stepdad, Juan. Juan was a really cool guy. I mean, he didn't really talk much back then. I mean, if you know him, he really doesn't talk much now. But he's still cool. I grew very fond of him. He was the only guy my mom had brought around me besides my dad Victor, which I guess isn't my dad but my stepdad, but whatever, it doesn't even matter. Victor. And you know, Juan was chill. We would hang out, we would go out on the weekend and do family things. One really funny memory I have from growing up with him was when I did my first communion. I really wanted to go camping. So he's like, all right. So me, him, and my mom, we went camping in his brown van. He took out the seats and we were able to camp inside. So we didn't really camp outdoors. But I remember buying gummy worms because I am obsessed with gummy worms. I love them. And I remember buying them and putting them in somewhere, you know, in the van or whatever. And I never ate my gummy worms. And my mom doesn't like them. So I know Juan ate them. Till this day, he will not admit that he ate my gummy worms. And I will never let it go. I bring it up every so often. And he's like, I didn't eat them. I'm like, I know you did. But you know, that was the kind of relationship we had growing up. It was just, he was fun, and he, whatever I wanted to do, he went above and beyond to make sure that I got it. I mean, I was very blessed with a great stepdad. I loved Juan and how he was with me. He was kind. He never reprimanded me. He never yelled. He showed me love, and he really did treat me like I was his daughter. I remember making him a Father's Day card, and I just loved him being part of our family. He was nice to my dad Robert. I mean, they didn't like chit chat or whatever. They weren't buddies, but when it was drop off or pick up and they would see each other, they would say hi. I was so happy. I had a family again, and it was great. You know, during this time that I didn't see Victor, I still saw his family. I would go to parties with them. His niece was actually my godmother for my first communion, and I loved her so much. So I was always at her house, and whenever they had parties, they would pick me up. But honestly, I really wanted to go to their parties just to see if Victor would show up. I missed him. He was my dad. I mean, he was my dad for the first 6 years of my life, and I loved him and I missed him, even if, you know, he didn't want anything to do with me. I remember that I would go to family parties. Still, I would be collecting all the little Tommies for him. So if he ever did decide to come back and pick me up for church on Sunday or for anything, I would have a little jar of Tommy candies waiting for him. Then when I was 8, I went to Mexico, and I was so happy to see my grandma, Victor's mom. And I remember getting off the truck and running to hug her, and she like forced hugged me. And I was so sad. Like, that was my grandma. And she gave me a cold look and hug, and I was hurt. Victor's family, even my godmother, stopped coming around, and they stopped calling me, and I was so hurt. I wanted nothing to do with his family anymore. The family that had embraced me and loved me, and I had all these adventures and memories with, they just were able to toss me to the side while I cared and loved all of them so much. It was really hard. But I mean, life goes on. I was going a lot to my dad Robert's family's house. I started creating wonderful bonds with my grandma, my grandpa, my aunts, my uncle, my niece. And my mom would allow me to go to his house whenever I wanted to on the weekends. And over time, my mom felt more comfortable enough for me to even sleep over at my grandma's house, which is where my dad lived. And I was so happy with that. My dad Robert and I would do a lot of things together. We would go to batting cages. We would go have dinner together. We would go to the movies. We would go to golf and stuff, go to Boomers, go do stuff every time, you know, I was there. And then my grandma had a pool in her house, and so I would live there during the summers. It was amazing. With my niece, we would have the time of our life. You know, I was so happy to have my dad Robert in my life, and I loved him a lot. And him and I were just so close, and I was just really grateful that, you know, even though I didn't have my dad Victor that raised me from being born till I was 6, I had my real dad, and I was grateful for that. When I turned 10, my mom and my stepdad Juan had a baby, and I was finally a big sister, and I love my little brother, and I was over the moon. I couldn't control myself. I wasn't an only child no more, and that was okay. But with having my baby brother in our home, our lives really did change. The dynamics of our entire family. This was my stepdad's first child, so it was big for him. I was so used to being the only child in the house, and that took a lot of getting used to. I mean, being an only child for 10 years, I mean, it's hard once a new little body comes in and, you know, the attention isn't all about you anymore. And as the years passed by, we learned to become this new type of blended family. I was a family of 4 at my mom's house, which was me, my mom, my stepdad, and my little brother. And then on the weekends, I was a family of 2, just me and my dad. And it was a new experience for everybody and for myself, and getting used to all of this. But, you know, we made it work, and we learned a lot. So I'm excited to continue sharing my experiences when it comes to being in a blended family. So I hope you guys tune in, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.